We are joined by DawgNation insider Connor Riley, who just got the chance to hear Kirby Smart speak. Connor, what was your immediate takeaway from Kirby's time at the podium?
Yeah, I think the thing that strikes me today is the Nick Saban-ness that sort of looms over Kirby Smart in particular. I got a chance to sort of sit by the ESPN set, and I could see Nick Saban watching intently as Kirby Smart speaks. There's a lot of chatter around Nick Saban here, his first time at SEC Media Days as an analyst. Kirby didn't hesitate to make a joke at Saban's expense, remembering to bring his credential to get in here. But sort of the Nick Saban era that looms over it, Kirby having the chance to be the guy, the coach now in this league, second longest tenure, the only coach in the conference that has won a national championship at this point in time. And so I think that aspect all sort of looming and hanging over the specter of Kirby Smart today.
Yeah, one thing that we've been talking about this week is now with Nick Saban out of the picture, Kirby almost assumes this Speaker of the House role for other SEC coaches. Would you say that he approached today differently than he would in any other press conference?
It felt different today than I think it has when Kirby Smart has gone up there to talk in recent years. Now, in the past, he's used sort of his podium time to reveal his big speech or the big mantra. They sort of let that be known earlier in the year with the obvious Nike references there. Didn't touch on some of the off-field stuff in the big room, touched on that obviously in greater detail in the small room today. But I think it was a different tone from Kirby Smart, maybe more measured, less maybe attacking out there, understanding that he's got to take a more maybe diplomatic voice in his new role as sort of the dean of SEC coaches as it stands right now.
And you mentioned the mantra. It seems that this year's is assume nothing. How does that kind of resemble the identity of this team?
Yeah, it I think obviously harkens back to the Nike Shoe Dog book, the memoir written by Phil Knight. And, you know, you talk to Malachi Starks, you talk to Michael Williams. You know, it's the first year in their college careers that they're not entering the season as a defending national champion. And so they admit, like, it's not any different in the way we're going out and approaching things this year. We're still going to hunt. We're still trying to go out there and win a national championship. So from a mindset standpoint, nothing has changed. I think this team is just as hungry as ever, even though for the first time in Starks and Williams' career, they're not entering the season as defending national champions.
Yeah, I saw you earlier. You were getting the chance to listen to Malachi Starks. I think one of the questions that we have for him is we know that he's a leader when it comes to actions. We see the stats. We know what he's capable of on the field. But I feel like this year his role really has to change with Kamari Lassiter, Javon Bullard, and Tyke Smith out of the way. He has to be a leader in terms of vocalness, too. Did you think that you saw that from him in his time?
Oh, yeah. Malachi Starks is one of the most engaged, I think, Georgia players in terms of talking to him. You see the emotional intelligence when you hear from him in terms of him being very thoughtful, candid with his responses there. Had a great response when asked about his rating in the NCAA video game. He's not happy that he's a 72 strength. He's a good bit stronger than that. You talk about leadership and what Malachi needs to bring from that area. Malachi Starks has the potential to be the best defensive player in the country this year. I think he knows that and has the ability to live up to that. And if he's doing that, he's going to drag this team along with him. And yes, it's a young defensive back room, and they lose a senior in David Daniel, who was dismissed from the team, we learned today. I think that Malachi Starks is plenty capable of carrying this Georgia defense this year, and both through his ability but also his leadership skills is going to be able to do that.
And we learned right before Kirby took the podium that David Daniel-Sisavanh was dismissed from the team. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it sounds like Kirby didn't come out and say it, but this is relating to some of the driving-related infractions that have propped up more and more. And I think that Kirby, in the small group setting, really hammered home this idea of, like, we're doing our best. We're trying to take this seriously. He mentions there will be suspensions, doesn't mention anyone by name, so that obviously doesn't clear anything up when it comes to Small Munden or Trevor Etienne and their status moving forward. But I think David Daniel is an example of Georgia knows they have to take this seriously. He mentions that they are now fining players through the Classic City Collective in terms of traffic-related incidents. And so that this is something where, you know, at a certain point, you know, you wonder what Kirby Smart is doing. I think that Kirby has tried every avenue to both protect his own players, because he does make the good point of not wanting to punish these guys twice by punishing them in the media and then punishing them behind closed doors. But I also think, you know, he's doing everything he can. And at a certain point in time, we have to put this at the feet of the players there as well and hold them responsible for these mistakes and infractions.
Sounds like the double jeopardy rule is in place here.
Yeah, you know, it's not exactly the Tommy Lee Jones, Ashley Judd movie, but again, I think that's a big reason why, as frustrating as it can be for some, why he doesn't publicly announce that there will be suspensions. I'm sure we'll notice. I know there are going to be a lot of people eagerly waiting to see whether Small Munden's out there on the field for the first game against Clemson, whether Trevor Etienne is out there as well. It's certainly going to be something to watch. And while you understand Kirby's thinking, the other point of that, of not addressing it, or at least not publicly acknowledging what those suspensions will be, it continues to be a storyline and a question that will be asked up until kickoff for that Clemson game on August 31st.
Speaking of storylines, the thing about this summer is that content slows down. We don't have as much to work with. We're basically taking an inch and trying to turn it into a mile. But then you have an event like this, which is kind of like the pregame to the kickoff of the season. Based on what you heard today, are there any new storylines that you're going to closely follow?
Are you wearing a mask? Is that Brandon Adams under there? That's a very Brandon Adams-esque question.
Is that a compliment or an insult?
No one is as good as Brandon Adams. That is absolutely a compliment. It's interesting. From a Georgia standpoint, I feel like this team in particular is covered so closely. It's hard to get a lot of new ground there. Michael Williams gave an interesting answer when talking about, what his role is going to look like this year. I think there's a large assumption that people think, he's just going to play outside linebacker 100% of the time. He told me today he estimates it's probably about 70-30, him still playing on the defensive line, especially on first and second down there. His role in that regard isn't going to change a whole much. I think in a pass rushing sense, in obvious pass rushing situations, that's where you maybe see Michael Williams kick out to the jack spot there. Carson Beck is diplomatic as you would expect, poised, polished when speaking to reporters on a number of things. Gave a great Mike Bobo story about how Mike Bobo is kind of deaf, and so when he's talking into the headsets now, he's essentially screaming because he can't regulate how loud he is. And so Carson's trying to figure out how to have that turned down. So, some fun, interesting storylines, but in terms of overarching new things learned about this team, about this coming season, not too much. They were asked a lot about Texas, obviously, understandably, with us being here in Dallas, Georgia, going to Texas on October 19th. They're keeping it very by the book. Mike Hell is saying, I'm looking forward to the next game, which happens to be against Clemson, more so than that game against Texas on October 19th.
I want to end on this. We're going to talk about it more on DawgNation Daily on Friday. Have you had a chance to play College Football 25 yet?
I have. I was playing last night. I made the mistake of playing on Heisman difficulty to start. It's a very different game. I got my butt kicked the first time around. Second time around, played at Texas, wanted to have some fun. Threw 3 interceptions with Quinn Ewers. Put Arch Manning in there, threw 6 touchdowns. Isaiah Bond, a very fun player to play with. Find your fast receivers and just get them the football. But I'm very glad that the game is, in fact, back. Yeah,
we're looking forward to hearing more about that on Friday on DawgNation Daily. Connor Riley, thank you so much for joining us. I know Connor's going to have a lot of articles out about SEC Media Days, so make sure to check those out on DawgNation.com.